you are mentioning liability, waiver, and also penalties. So, of course, just define to us so that at least someone can understand what we are talking about.
So true, Kelvin. I know a lot of people may not understand some of those terminologies. So what we refer to as a liability is a debt. A debt, as long as it's in for tax purposes, we call it a liability. So when you have your principal tax, what I referred to earlier, when you file your return and you have a positive figure at the bottom of your return, that is a principal tax, that is a liability. When you don't make that payment on time, it attracts interest at 1%. It attracts a penalty subject to the amount or the time that you filed it. So you might be given a penalty for late filing if you file your return late. You'll be penalized for late payment if you make the payment late. So for those people who filed prior to 31st December 2022 and didn't make any payments, they have penalties and interest that accrued. And there's some people who are also penalized and given fines for periods probably that they did not honor summons and things like that. Now, those are the terminologies that we use: the liability, the principal, the penalties, the interest.
Okay.
So you might have a penalty because of you filed your return late. So you might look and see, oh, am I supposed to apply for amnesty for this? No. As long as you don't have a principal tax, you will automatically qualify.
Okay.
But that is up to the period 31st December 2022. So that most of the individuals will find themselves in that category because they file yearly returns and the accounting period is mostly January to December. So if they file their returns, or sometimes some people may open their iTax profile and look and say, oh, I don't have any liabilities, I am okay, I have amnesty. No, you may not have amnesty if you did not file a return.
Okay. So you needed to have filed a return for you now to be eligible for tax amnesty.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that. And for example, now, someone has not been filing returns. They are still working. They are moving on with their life. So how does it work when it comes to you are getting an email from a KRA telling you, this is what you owe, this is what you owe us and you need to pay. So when it comes to such a situation, what usually happens? Is the individual able to apply for tax amnesty?
Yes. Now, if you've gotten a notification to tell you that you have a liability to pay, now there's different types of categories. Assuming you're working and you are deducted pay as you earn, that is, your employer is supposed to make that remittance to KRA. So if you get a notification that is telling you you have a debt, you as an employee have a debt, first I would laud you for getting that notification because ideally your details on our system are correct. So it is good because you're getting information from us. So it is important to open your iTax profile, confirm the information that is there. Because maybe you filed your return incorrectly, you need to confirm the information. Or maybe you actually do have a liability that needs to be paid. Or it is a reconciliation issue and you need to follow it up and confirm whether the liability from your employer side was actually paid for, so that you have a clean ledger. What we call a ledger is where you have debits and credit. When you file your return, it is a debit. When your employer makes the remittances, the monthly remittances, it is a credit. At the end of the period, it's supposed to balance.
Okay.
Both the debit and the credit. So if you receive a notification, it is important to open and understand what that notification is all about. Most people, yes, do see KRA notifications and ignore, but it is important to open. If you're not sure, you can walk into any KRA office, you'll be assisted. If you may not be able to get to a KRA office, we do have information on our KRA website where you can call the call center and you'll be assisted. If you give them your PIN, they're able to, and the PIN, that we look at you as we use PIN to look at you. I may look at Kelvin and I don't know Kelvin. But if you give me your PIN number, I understand Kelvin.
You will know exactly.
I understand Kelvin.
Okay.
So we look at you with a PIN number. So it is important to know your PIN number.
Okay.
If you do not know, it's important to have a valid ID. When you have a valid ID and you walk into any KRA office and you identify yourself with your ID, we are able to get your information and you'll be able to be assisted.
All right, thank you for that. And for example, now, taxpayers who don't agree with the certain debts, and for the period, of course, that you've mentioned, 31st December 2022, what happens when they now say, okay, according to my documents and what I know, I don't agree with what KRA is bringing and what it's saying about this period?
So there are people who maybe have assessments, additional assessments. If they objected to the assessments and the objection decisions were made but have not been implemented in the system, it is important for them to make a follow-up so that the decision is implemented in the system so that they may benefit from the tax amnesty for that period. For the scenario that we had just described earlier, just now, of the employee who received a notification and they're told probably they have a liability, it is important to know how the liability has come about, because it could be erroneous filing. It is important to know so that you are able to amend your return. If it is within the period of 5 years, you are able to amend. If it is the employer reconciliation, you look at your return and see, oh, yes, I filed it correctly, and the liability is on the employer side. We are able to, with your P9, follow up from your employer's tax service office and have the reconciliation implemented so that you're able to benefit from amnesty.
All right.
Yes.
Now, let's move and look at another issue. You've applied for the tax amnesty, and then, of course, there are regulations that you need to follow through that period in order for you to finish the debt. So what happens to someone who applies but doesn't adhere to the regulations that have been placed there? Because sometimes, of course, you'll apply and then now you don't follow. Maybe 2 months later, you've not done anything, or 3 months later. So what applies and what usually happens in that situation?
Remember, when you made an application, an amnesty application, that means you got into a payment plan. So ideally, you had an idea that first you do have a debt that needs to be paid and you are committing to make that payment. If you see that you have not been able to make payment or made payment as per your plan, it is important to reach out to your tax service office and inform them that you're not able or have not been able to implement the plan as stipulated. Because remember, the payment plan is still debt and the terms and conditions apply. If you do not make payment, you're subject to being enforced. However, it is also important to note that amnesty is being applied per period. Therefore, if you had debt running through probably January to December 2022, and you offset January, March, June, you will benefit from amnesty for those periods. You do not have, you remember when you were applying for waiver, ideally previously, you would have to have completed making payment on principal in full. Whereas for amnesty, you just need to pay per period. So if you clear your January debt, the penalty and interest that have accrued for that period, you get you're granted amnesty on. So you clear per period, you benefit. So remember, today is 4th, we just have less than 26 days to go. Therefore, for those who did apply and have not been able to make payment thereof, they do have 26 days to go. Wajikakamue, walipe.
All right. Even as we still speak about this, so how long is the amnesty for the period that you've mentioned? Is it like a year? Is it 6 months? How long is it?
The amnesty period, amnesty started
or it depends
from September.
with the debt.
No, remember, this amnesty was inculcated into the law, and it has stipulated timelines. Amnesty began 1st September 2023, and it is ending 30th June 2024. That was anchored in the Finance Act 2023. And that was only for liabilities prior to 31st December 2022.
Okay.
So anybody with a liability coming forward up to April last month, they will not benefit from amnesty. But the amnesty period is still running. We have few days to go, 26 days to go. Actually, it's a lot. There are many days. And payments can still be made. So Kenyans should be able to rally up.
Okay.
Check their profiles, visit KRA offices, get their tax and debt status so that they know what to do.
Okay.
Because I believe once we inform Kenyans, once they're educated, they become empowered and they would know best what to do. Yes.
So the tax amnesty, does it apply to all tax obligations, or are there some of the tax obligations that are really exempt from this?
Okay, thank you, Kelvin. The amnesty and the obligations that are being covered under that are only what is in the Tax Procedures Act. And that would be pay as you earn, VAT. VAT is value added tax, income tax, resident income tax, individual. For example, that is what we file, income tax returns, monthly rental obligations, people who file their returns on a monthly basis for rental income, income tax for companies or partnerships. We do have excise duty. Excise duty is not covered under amnesty because the act that covers it is the East African Community Customs Management Act. So it is not covered under the Tax Procedures Act. And any other act, for example, the Banking Act, all those other liabilities do not qualify for amnesty. Only the obligations that are covered under the Tax Procedures Act.
Okay.
Yes.
So okay, let's move on and look at, of course, tax amnesty and how it's contributing to a stretched or strained economy. Because the economy right now that we are in, of course, inflation dropped some last month, but we are still under some strain. When it comes to tax amnesty, how does it impact an economy like Kenya?
Remember when I mentioned earlier, Kevin, that this was supposed to give the taxpayers a relief because there are a lot of people who did business even pre-COVID and COVID hit and they were not able to continue with business. Probably they stopped filing returns and now business probably either it's picking up or they want to pick it up and they look at their PIN and they have liabilities, they have penalties, they have not filed returns and they feel, where can I get a break? So that is where tax amnesty came in. That is why it was introduced. So that you're told, come, file your returns. These returns up to this period, all the penalties that will have accrued because you'll have filed these returns late, you will be forgiven. You will be waived of those penalties. And therefore, it was to give Kenyans a break on the penalties, on those liabilities that they've been having in their profiles so that they can breathe a sigh of relief. Ideally, that was the reason why amnesty was introduced.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so let us look at the eligibility. What is involved in this, and what do you look at, especially when it comes to, okay, Kelvin has applied for tax amnesty. This is how he has been performing. This is how he has been filing returns, and now he's eligible to get tax amnesty. What goes into that?
Now, there are those who are actually clean, that didn't have any penalties or interest. They filed their returns to date. They don't have any principal liabilities. They didn't need to apply for any amnesty. There are those who did have penalties. They probably filed their returns. They needed a PIN to take for help, for example, students who did that, and they didn't know they needed to file. They come, they file, they get the penalties. They will qualify for automatic amnesty. And how you will qualify for automatic amnesty is, if you log in, we have some system triggers. If you log in, your profile, it will trigger amnesty and the penalties will be vacated. If you make a payment, for example, as I stated earlier, if per period, if you had a liability and you're making payment for that, it is also a trigger to vacate penalties. Therefore, it's not, there are those who will get amnesty, there are those who need to apply for amnesty, there are those who don't need amnesty at all because they were clean in the first place. Yeah. So if you had liabilities, you make the payments, you will qualify for amnesty up to 31st December 2022. But the payments need to be done by 30th of June 2024.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So let's look at Kenyans who have not been just using the iTax profile, of course, that you've mentioned. So when it comes to the iTax profile, what goes into that? Because when you talk about the returns, the tax returns, for very many people, it's a very, very, very tedious process. Very many people don't usually like doing it. They get help from different other areas or different people who are not themselves. So when it comes to the profile, the iTax profile, so what goes into this? What is the whole process, and how can even someone just do that by themselves?
Thank you, Kelvin. I think it is. It's an elephant in the room. But most people, ideally filing a return isn't that difficult. I think it's just a mindset. But if they needed help, if someone needed help, they'd walk into any KRA office. And as I said earlier, we will know you by your PIN. It's important to know your PIN because that is what you're going to use to log in. You log into your profile using your PIN. You will have to put in a password. And the reason why I state a lot visiting our offices is, for example, if your information or your details are not updated, you will get the opportunity to update them. That is your phone number, your email. And therefore, because you need, you'll be sent for a one-time password to your email to be able to log in. And therefore, if you don't have all that information, again, even getting access into your profile will be difficult. So once you're able to update your information, your details on iTax, you log into your iTax profile. If you're an employee and you have your P9, a P9 is that tax deduction card that your employer gives you at the end of the year or the beginning of the next year, you're able to use that information to file your return. And it is not a very difficult process because ideally the information that you need to use is on that deduction card. And you fill it in and you can be guided very easily. And once you understand how that is done, you'll appreciate the process. And then there are those who may not have any income. So there's, under the tab for filing returns, there's that of file nil return. And those are 2 clicks of a button. You file nil return and you submit and you're done. It is 2-step process, you're done. There are those who have business income. And therefore, the first page will have a lot of questions to ask you so that we know what to pre-populate for you to fill in. There are those who have insurance relief, those who have mortgages. So depending with the information that you want to provide in your tax return, the first page where you fill in your PIN, you fill in your name, the period that you're filing your return for, it will request you to answer yes or no to the other questions so that it knows how to open, which pages to open for you to fill in. So if you have insurance, you click yes, it will pre-populate a different page. So every person's return is different, but the basics are there, the PIN, the filing period, your name, and then for employment purposes, your employer's name, basics, that will be there. And it is very simple. But the first thing is to make sure that the information in iTax is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Now, when you look at the future, going forward, is there a window that is going to come again where we see tax amnesty coming in?
I may not say no, but right now I can categorically not say yes either.
Yes.
So I would urge people to make sure, take advantage of this period that we have, the 26 days that are remaining. Because tax amnesty, depending with the government, because remember this is a law that is inculcated in, the amnesty is inculcated in the law. Depending with the government and what government feels or sees, or the cries that are presented, that is probably the basis that would be made for amnesty in future. But remember, every government, I think, has come up with an amnesty of some sort, and a lot of people have benefited. So it is good. It is good not to have the Kenyan mentality of waiting for the last minute. I think we're almost there, last minute now. Yes. We're in June, but I would urge Kenyans to take up this opportunity because we don't know what lies ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
So now this situation where, of course, an individual was working, they were filing their returns, and then the job is no longer there. They are unemployed. So in that situation, what usually happens?
Remember,
and are they also eligible for tax amnesty?
Just because you don't have a job, as long as you have a PIN, you need to file a return. So if you got your PIN to open an account, or you needed to do a transfer for some purchase of land, and that was it, you never did anything else, you need to go back and check, you need to file a return. As long as you have a PIN, you need to file a return. And if you're not sure whether you actually do have a PIN or what you got one day, sometime in the past was actually a PIN, if you visit any carrier office with your valid ID and identify yourself, they will confirm for you whether you have a valid PIN number. And if you do, they will guide you on how to file those returns. So as long as you have a PIN number, you're expected to file a return. Yes.
All right, so even as we come to a conclusion of this particular conversation, when you look at the technological advancements that we have, and almost every industry right now is moving towards the advancing operations within their particular departments. So when you look at the tax filing system and also the tax amnesty that we are talking about today, moving forward, how is technology going to impact this particular industry?
iTax came to simplify the filing system. Remember, we used to do it manually, and then you had to attach documentation. They needed to be stamped, and we used to file things manually. Now, iTax is here from wherever you are, whether mobile, computer, whether within the country or outside of the country, you're able to access. You're able to access, as long as you have internet, you're able to access your profile.
Yes.
Going forward, we are hoping to even be able to have your returns pre-done. So all you have to do is validate that the information is correct and submit. So information and technology is there for us, and we have to embrace it. And we also want to make things simpler, so that those who feel like filing a return is such a cumbersome task, or they don't know where to begin, all they need to do is probably just log in, look at the information, and click without having to pre-populate anything, because ideally it will have been pre-populated for you.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you so much, Christine, for joining us. That is Christine Macharia, who is a tax expert from Kenya Revenue Authority, that is KRA, speaking to us about tax amnesty. And also, we have 26 days remaining in order for us to file our returns. So we need to do that before the time ends. We've come to the end of this particular edition of Business Today. My name is Kelvin Nyakundi. Stick around. Be a KTN is coming up next.